It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting, either through my website, emailrevealer.com, or you can just email me directly at Opperman Investigations. Now, if you like our show, be sure and check out our Patreon. If you go to Patreon, you can hear all the shows that we play Monday to Friday, AM/FM radio, but we cut out all the commercials. It's ad-free. And, of course, our archives you can find at Spreaker.com. And if you go there, you can sign up for free, get an email notification anytime we put up new content. There's a live show broadcast. I do that every Friday night solo, just talking about what's going on during the week. I'm going to be talking this week about, I'm going to be doing a second volume to how to become a successful private investigator, a step-by-step guide to a career in investigations. We're going to be doing volume 2. So I'll be talking about that this Friday night. And also, too, there's a chat room and on the Spreaker channel there. So I'm very excited today. We have Dawn and Dave Koop. They just started a brand new podcast called Dead Man Talking about Douglas Clark. And you can find them too on YouTube, Douglas Clark YouTube channel. Now, and also too on Facebook too as well, Douglas Clark, where they're going to be uploading all the documents. I just heard about Douglas Clark. He's called the Sunset Strip Killer. And Dave and Dawn are convinced that Mr. Clark may be innocent. Let's start with Dawn. Dawn, are you there?
I'm here.
Dawn Koop, how are you? Tell us about yourself. Who is Dawn Koop?
Dawn Koop is, I'm a mom. I'm married to Dave. I'm a therapist, a researcher, and I'm just incredibly curious about the world. I think that's a good way to summarize me.
Okay, excellent. Dave, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Dave Koop. Who is Dave Koop?
Well, I am married to Dawn, of course, and I don't mean to sound cheesy or anything, but she's my pride and joy, and I have kids, and I was a musician for many years in Los Angeles. Really got wrapped up into wanting to do something as far as writing or a documentary or something, so we got into the serial killer realm, I was always fascinated with the serial killers of the 1970s in Los Angeles, where I'm from. There was so many killers back in that day in one area. It was absolutely it was mind-blowing. So about 2 years ago, we decided to make a documentary or a book, however it turned out. And we reached out to Douglas Clark, the worst of the worst, the Sunset Strip Slayer. And we started talking to him, and that's how this whole thing came about. And that's basically who I am and where I'm at right now in life.
Now, Douglas Clark and his girlfriend, Carol Bundy, what makes you say that they're the worst of the worst? Because when I was reading up on their case, it just seems like, they were picking up street people, prostitutes, they were shooting them, and then cutting their heads off and putting them in decorative boxes, as far as the understanding that I have.
That was one. That was one case. God, it's horrible. They were really, I don't like to put Doug into this because there's so much question about this case, but basically what the public believes is that Doug and Carol were these lovers, which that wasn't even true. And they were going around killing people, and notably they killed a pair of sisters from Huntington Beach, killed them, and they were just really doing horrible things with the bodies. Just a very gruesome case as opposed to some of the other people just, raping and killing and then dumping the bodies. They were mutilating and, like you said, chopping off heads. And so there was a different aspect to them than some of the other serial killer cases, especially because there was a woman involved.
And if I just can add, after the arrests were made, I think, they really portrayed Doug as just this incredible jerk, this egocentric, just no remorse, just really, I think that made his reputation even worse, the way that he's kind of been portrayed, obviously by the way he's been portrayed by the media.
Yeah, they describe him as sort of like a gigolo who would live off these women, like a freeloader. It seems like they talk about. Well, what did you find out? Who was Doug Clark and who was Carol Bundy?
Okay, well, we'll start, I guess, with Carol. Let's start with Carol because she's a pretty fascinating case. She was this woman that the LAPD basically painted as this poor single mother who men were just walking all over her. She was the LAPD never, or the media never passed the chance to talk about how unattractive she was, about her big bifocal glasses, and how she was, I've heard her described as a little mouse. She had 2 children. They're just in a bad place. I mean, you can imagine. And Doug, on the other hand, he was in the Army. He had an impeccable record in the service during Vietnam. He got out of Vietnam. He went and hit the streets of L.A. He was on a motorcycle. He had a girlfriend for a while, his high school sweetheart. He was going back and forth to L.A. Then he got kind of caught up with the whole bar life, the night scene, and kind of turned into a vagabond. He started just renting rooms here and there, and that's how he met Carol Bundy.
If I can add to it, Carol, in her early life, there was a lot of trauma, a lot of sexual trauma, a lot of her mother died early, there was incest, so they used that to sort of portray her continuously as a victim throughout her life, even though she was a pretty savvy, very creative, smart woman. She was a registered nurse. She did some writing with a man named Richard Geist. They did some pulp writing. She traveled. She'd been married a couple of times. She came into some money from a former husband. And one thing about Doug that I really think is important is he has no history of violence towards women or anything that would really indicate that this was like anything was leading up to this.
Okay, you mentioned Vietnam. I see here on Wikipedia that his father was a naval intelligence officer. Now, yes. when Clark was in Vietnam, any connection to the Phoenix program?
We've asked him about that, and he said absolutely none. And the reason why, this kind of takes us back to why we even got into this. We were looking at the stuff with David Berkowitz out in New York, and we were thinking these serial killers there has to be some common denominator between these people. They must know each other. They must be part of something bigger. Doug was in the military. I've even seen an episode of Program to Kill where they're saying, Doug was trained as a serial killer. But there was nothing like that. He sat behind a computer and he did radar. He was watching radar. That's all he did. But that's how we got into this whole thing, thinking that maybe Doug had those tests done to him. This is what happened to him. But no, that wasn't the case at all.
I think that's, kind of how we got into this initially is just this fascination, like, talking about the ultimate evil, the Process Church, MK Ultra, all these different things, these strange connections. So, this is actually a fluke that where we're at right now. This was not something we anticipated or expected. We thought we were going to be going down a very different sort of path. So, but from the letters that Doug wrote to us, and then as we started to research more, we saw some some things that really raised some doubts. So we sort of just honed in on that aspect of it, and that's where we are today.
How did you first make contact with Douglas Clark?
I wrote him a letter, and I told him what our plans were for the project, and if he would want to give us just some of his thoughts about the time and what was going on. And I don't remember really what I said to him, but I left my phone number. I said, I don't know how you communicate out. We don't write to serial killers. Like I wrote to you, Ed, we're not serial killer groupies or anything like that. So, we don't glorify their garbage that they do. So, I just told him, I don't know how you communicate outside of death row, but here's my phone number if you ever have time. If not, we can correspond by mail. And within a week, my phone rings, and it's this recording from San Quentin, and it's like, it's Douglas Clark. And I'm like, what the hell? I told Don, Douglas Clark is on the phone. Yeah. And that's how it started. We just started talking to him, and he just started giving us information. Like I said, we thought he was dead guilty when we met him. or when we first started talking to him. And then as these conversations progressed, this information was coming out, all this information. And he's like, well, this person from, this author from London thinks I didn't do this. He thinks I'm innocent. The writers from Vanity Fair put out an article back in the early 90s. They think I didn't do this. And he starts giving us all this information, and we're looking into it, and it just snowballed into this thing where it's like, wow, they really railroaded this guy. And this guy isn't the Sunset Strip Slayer. I mean, we really feel that. Like we said, we don't think Doug is an angel by any stretch of the imagination, but he's not someone who should be on death row. And more important than that, Ed, we really feel that the families of these poor girls deserve to know who actually killed their children.
Well, then what about Carol Bundy? Do you think she's involved with these killings?
Oh, absolutely.
You know what, Ed? I think that she was one of the main players. Her and her actual lover, Jack Murray. They kind of had this relationship where they were engaged in some pretty hairy things, very dark, sexually deviant sort of things. And she seems to be the one that was really.
It seems to be her and her co-conspirator, I should say, was the one that she was her victim that she was charged for of cutting off his head in his own van. That's who we believe was the real Sunset Strip Slayer. That's the one that we feel is, because all the evidence points to him. I mean, besides the crazy cover-up from the LAPD, but the evidence really does point to him. And it's not Doug saying, hey, look, it's him. It's him. It's the evidence that we've been presented with, where it's just very simple to say, wow, this guy is probably the killer.
And this is not just what Doug has told us. After Doug started to share some things with us and we had some doubts, we started researching, just trying to get as much information as we could, trying to get court documents sent to us from Los Angeles. We went out to LA, we went to the courthouse, and because of COVID, we ran into some barriers, but we've gotten a lot of information that there's reports that Jack Murray was very violent against women. I mean, sexually sadistic towards, people he was with. He terribly abused his wife. He held a gun on a kid once.
A 10-year-old.
A 10-year-old.
Doug's, or not Doug, I'm sorry, Carol's son, 10-year-old son, he put a .38 in his face and threatened to kill him.
And this is multiple people saying this. So, and then I'll let Dave talk. I'll let you ask a question.
Yeah, he broke his wife's arms. He used to beat his wife constantly. It's just really shady character, really not a nice person.
Okay, and the official story of Bundy murdering this, his name is Murray, right? In the van there, he's a country music singer. In the official story, was Douglas Clark involved in that murder?
Yes. No, he wasn't at all. Now this is going to kind of, I don't want this to get confusing, so I'm going to try to explain it as simply as possible. Doug was at Carol's apartment with another girl. Well, Carol was at the bar with Jack, and then ultimately in the van down the street from the bar in Van Nuys. What happened was the girl that was staying with Carol and Doug had a seizure, and Doug had to, in the middle of the night, had to call the paramedics. Meanwhile, Carol is on her way home with Jack Murray's head to show Doug and basically frame Doug for the Jack Murray murder. But because of the seizure, it completely ruined Carol's alibi that she was innocent, she was home, she did Doug did everything. So it ruined everything, and it even ruined the prosecution. Was like, there's no way we can pin this on Doug because paramedics, police, everything, it's on report. So had that girl not had that seizure that night, there is no way possible that he would have been charged, or he would have been charged for that murder had that not happened. Sorry about that. I'm getting a little confused, but
no, you're fine. You're fine.
That's what's going on with that.
So now, when you talk to Douglas Clark now, what does he say happened from the start? How did he meet?
Okay.
How did he meet Carol Bundy? All that kind of stuff.
Okay, so Doug was out on kind of hopping around with at the Little Nashville and meeting women, and he met Carol. Carol offered him a place to live that they were talking, and Doug needed a place to stay, and $30 a week or something like that. He could stay with her. He moved in with Carol, not really having sex here and there, but nothing like a relationship or anything. So it turned into just kind of this living relationship, basically, just a living
like roommates
situation. Yeah, like roommates.
Okay, and let me just add one thing here. Don't worry about the dog, okay? We got a commercial break coming up in a couple of minutes. You can take care of the dog then. So don't get distracted by the dog.
That's what Dawn's doing. Dawn's trying to shut our dog up. I'm so sorry about that. I'm glad you caught that.
Don't worry. It's fine. No one cares about that.
Getting me off track.
No, I know. No one cares about that. Plus, we have a commercial coming up in a couple of minutes. So Doug moves in with Dawn. You're saying with Carol Bundy, and you're saying it was pretty much a platonic, like a roommate type of situation, occasional sex, like friends with benefits type of situation. And he's paying her $30 a week. Now, she has two young boys living in that house with her too, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Are those two?
I was gonna tell you really quick, Ed. You know, Carol says that at Little Nashville, she was with Jack Murray, and Jack Murray didn't want to be with her exclusively anymore. You know, he was married, but he kind of wanted to cool down the relationship, and she saw Doug, and that's the night that she picked Doug. Like, it was almost like an attempt to make Jack Murray jealous.
Gotcha.
Then that she grabbed him up. Yeah.
Now, what about these two boys, these two 11-year-old boys? That's her son.
Yeah.
We're about 11, right?
Yeah.
What do they say today? Have you been in contact with them? And what's their version of events?
You know, okay, so they are pretty much, I've tried to reach out to them because they're victims too. You know, they've experienced some horrible atrocities and traumas, but it seems like one of the boys, from what I found during some research, has kind of fallen into a similar pattern of behavior, has gotten into some similar criminal experiences, some sex offenses, and, you know, things like that. But they're pretty much, you know, under the radar. They don't want to be talked to.
Okay. And also, too, there's some allegations that they were molesting a local child, too, in the neighborhood, 11-year-old.
Yeah.
What's the story with that?
Okay, so basically what happened with that is the child met Carol first. And Carol was basically pandering her out. She was a 12-year-old girl. Carol was pandering her out to different men. First to Jack Murray and others that we don't know of, but we know for sure Jack Murray. And basically started using her as her kind of blackmail to have something on these guys. So what happened is she introduced Doug to her during one of their sexual encounters, Doug and Carol's, and Doug did not have sex with her. As a matter of fact, she even says on the record that they didn't have sex or anything like that, but Doug did pose with pictures with this girl, and that's how Doug got roped into this whole mess. And just a little side note, this is what has kept Doug sane in prison. Because of those pictures, he really does feel he belongs. He does deserve jail, and he kind of just says to himself, if I had not made these mistakes, I would not be here, so I'm kind of just getting what I deserve. But that does not excuse who the real killers are, and that's was something big for us to get over. But it, like I said, the victim's family need to know, and I'm sorry, you can't put a man on death row for what he did with the pictures.
And I don't want to, neither one of us want to minimize the what happened to this young lady, this person, maybe or to victim blame in any way, because she was hurt, you know. And from what I understand, Carol kind of started to groom her. She was also sexually involved with this kid, you know. But it was terrible. It was sex trafficking and sort of using leverage. She would want to take photographs to make sure she could get a picture with the guy. Jack Murray refused to have photographs taken. Doug was a little bit dopier and let it happen.
Yeah.
Has anybody been able to talk to this young lady?
You know, she won't talk to anybody as well. We saw there was what was the name of that website?
It was a message board, and she responded on the message board. It was something about Carol, and I tried to reach out to her, but I want to be very delicate about that because, you know, she was a victim in this too.
And also, Ed, we don't know if that's really her or not. Yeah. She's just using the girl's name and saying, yeah, that was me, and I saw the guns, and I saw Doug do this, and I saw Doug do that, but we don't know. I mean, that's just, you know, anyone can go online and say they're anybody, and, you know, so we don't really even know if that's her or not, but we haven't been able to find a trace of her at all.
Gotcha. Okay, so then continuing with Doug's version of events, what does Doug say happened?
So the first murder, now, mind you, the last murder with all this was Jane Doe. I forget the name they call it, Jane Doe's 8 or something like that. But the one right before it was Jack Murray. So Carol comes home with the head. Doug, the ambulance takes away the girl who was having the seizure. I believe her name was Sally. What's it?
Nikki Smith.
Nikki Smith takes her away. Doug goes out to the car with Carol. She opens the trunk, and he looks down in a bag. Now, mind you, at this point, Doug has no idea that they're killing people. There's any killing going on, nothing. He just thinks there's a lot of perversion going on, whatever. He looks in this bag, and he sees something that looks like a neck bone. He starts throwing up immediately. He goes to the back of the car. He starts throwing up. And she says, you know they will pin this murder on you if you go to the police with this. They're going to pin this murder on you, and there's absolutely nothing. Once they see the pictures of Shannon, they will know you're guilty. So Doug got rid of the head and then basically continued on with his life until he was arrested, which was very shortly after that.
So now you're saying that the first murder was Murray, the country singer, but if you look at Wikipedia...
That was the first murder Doug knew of. That was the first one. There was several before that.
Gotcha.
But that was the first one he knew of.
And the other ones were done between with Murray and Bundy. We're doing the other ones.
That's what we feel. Yeah, that's what it seems like. Go ahead. I think Dawn wanted to add something.
Oh no, I can wait.
Okay. So yeah, basically that was the first murder Doug knew about, and that put Doug in this whole blackmail kind of thing. The way Doug was arrested, he called the LAPD and he told them, look, he worked at the Jergens factory in Van Nuys or in Burbank, and said, I have information. I want to tell you about what's going on. Come at my lunch and we'll talk about this. He got the guns from Carol. He hid them at work. As soon as they came, they didn't want to talk to Doug. They wanted to arrest him. So what Doug did right there is lawyer up. He's like, look, I'm going to get, I don't know what they're arresting him for at that point, but he didn't want to say anything until he knew what was going on. It wasn't until he got downtown that he realized he was getting framed for all these other things that him and Carol and Jack did. So that's when he was just quiet. He's like, I'm not giving him the guns. I'm not giving him anything until I get an attorney. Well, meanwhile, the LAPD had the workers at the Jergens factory look for the guns, and they found the guns, which didn't make Doug look good at all. But that's how Doug was arrested. Ultimately, that's how he was arrested.
And then how did Bundy become in contact with police?
She was calling the police the whole time. There's something very important that we haven't even got to yet. But Carol Bundy was obsessed with serial killers. She was giving false leads to the detectives in the Hillside Strangler case the year before. She was writing to Ted Bundy all the time. She was just obsessed with serial killers. So she started playing with the police and calling them. And there is one phone call that is in police documents where the officer who answered the phone is trying to get information about her boyfriend, because she's saying, my boyfriend is a Sunset Strip slayer. Tell us about your boyfriend. Tell us about your boyfriend. Well, she messed up this one day, and she said, because there was a few calls, she said, my boyfriend, his name is John. He's in his 40s, which Doug was in his early 30s. He's in his 40s, and he drives a Plymouth, which Jack Murray had a red Dodge, but Plymouth and Dodge are the same thing, basically. So right there, she was throwing out Jack Murray. Now, what they also started doing, Carol and Jack, is they started calling some of the victims' families, friends of the victims. They started calling them and saying, yeah, we're with the police department. My name is Detective Douglas Clark. So they were already throwing out Doug as the fall guy. Now, I mean, Doug's not an idiot, I know that, and he would never call somebody if he was the killer and give him his real name. It just, he wouldn't do that. I mean, I wouldn't do that. I don't think anybody would do that. So that's how Carol started playing cat and mouse with them until finally she went into work one day and started telling her nurses at Valley Hospital in the San Fernando Valley, started bragging about the murders and talking about them, saying, yeah, we've been killing people, blah, blah, blah. The nurses called the police. The police arrived, and Carol was already gone. Then they went to her apartment and arrested her. And then that's when this whole thing begins. And, I mean, we probably won't have time to talk about it today, but even the court cases, just crazy things in the court case as well, that's just all cover-up. I mean, there's just everybody from the police to the DA to the attorney. That Doug's attorney was Maxwell Keith, who was Leslie Van Houten's attorney, who messed up her case so bad she was freed in the mid-'70s for a few years while she was getting a new trial because Maxwell Keith was just so incompetent. They granted her a new trial. Imagine that, one of the Manson girls getting a new trial and being freed. She was working at a law firm, and then they gave Doug Maxwell Keith to defend him in the Sunset Strip case. So they needed a body, and Don's going to give you some really important information right now, Ed, to kind of get you into this whole realm of the police thought of this. But
Okay.
I will say this: they needed a male body to prosecute because they messed up the Hillside Strangler case. They didn't catch Angelo Bono and Kenneth Bianchi. It was Washington that gave them Kenneth Bianchi. So they were coming off that wound. Then here comes the Sunset case, very well publicized. Everyone knew about it. They needed a man to prosecute, not a woman. And Don's going to go into something very important that happened that could have stopped these murders dead in its tracks 5 people before the end of it.
Okay, well, let's stop right there because you have to take a commercial break.
Okay.
But it's funny because you mentioned Leslie Van Houten, and I know off the air you mentioned Judge Ito was involved in this somehow. And did you know that Leslie Van Houten's appellate attorney was the mother of the limo driver in the O.J. Simpson case?
Oh, God.
This just gets, we say the deeper we go in this, Ed, it gets just smellier and smellier. Now, let me just throw this out since we're talking about that. The same detectives that were taking care of Doug's case are the same detectives that covered up Stephanie Lazarus and kept her out of jail for 20-some years for her case in killing the Rasmussen girl.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that. We're talking to Dave and Dawn Coop, C-O-O-P, Coop, Dave and Dawn Coop. Their podcast, brand new podcast, is called Dead Man Talking, Douglas Clark. You can find it on Spreaker. So you can go there and follow them right away and get a notification anytime they put up new content. They've already put up a ton of content. Douglas Clark on YouTube and also Facebook of Douglas Clark. So now, Dawn, you were telling me, you were about to tell me something. What was that?
One of the things that really created a lot of doubt for me is the specific gun that was used in the murders was a Raven, two Raven 25s, right? And when Margaret York, who was married to Judge Ito, she was working on the case, and they were like, well, let's figure out who bought these guns. They found, 6 people that purchased the guns in that area, in that time frame. One of those people being Carol Bundy, who bought 2 of these guns 3 days before Jack Murray's birthday, okay? But what Margaret York said was, let's check out all these guys, but women don't kill people. Don't even bother. So that's one of the first huge problems. And then Exie Wilson's head was found in a very ornate box that was very distinctive. They found the store that the box was purchased from, and the storekeeper gave Carol Bundy's exact description. So now they've got two incidences where Carol Bundy is connected to this, and they don't even bother to check in with her because she's female. And I that's something that really stands out for me.
But now, what about Douglas Clark? Didn't he have a competent attorney? And you said they gave him this attorney that was connected to Van Houten.
Leslie Van Houten's attorney. What happened was Doug wanted pro per. Doug's a very smart man, very shrewd. He wanted to handle pro per. He was like, nobody knows this better than me. I'm going to do this myself. Well, they gave him pro per pretty much up to the point when it was time to question his witnesses. And they pulled it from him. They pulled it from him and said, you're not handling the case correctly. We're going to appoint you an attorney. And that was Maxwell Keith. Now, when you're on a death row case, a death penalty case, you cannot pull a pro per from a client. They did the same thing to Charles Manson. Just a little side note, and I'm not saying Manson's innocent or anything, but they did the same thing to him. They would not allow him to defend himself. Ted Bundy had no problems, but
Now, what about though that you get a death penalty conviction? There's automatic appeals. Now, so none of these things have been brought up in appeal.
No, his appeals. He has only been to the Ninth Circuit Court since I think 1995, which he should have been there right when Doug was found guilty. He knew that there was so many things that were suppressed in court that they would not allow. They had witnesses ready to say, I was with Doug on this night and this night. The Judge Torrey would not allow anything. So Doug said, well, then if I'm guilty, I want the death penalty. He was saying that in court to the jury I want the death penalty because I know I'll be in front of the Supreme Court in no time. They will let my evidence come through and I'll be freed. That's what he did. And they held on to his case forever. He still, to this day, 40 years later from his arrest, 42 years later from his arrest, Ed, he still has not been in front of the Supreme Court with his case.
Ed, some of the documents that I was able to get from the LA, the courts, were some printouts of like the ledger from when he was going through all the court proceedings, and it shows the amount of money that they were giving out to different private investigators or lawyers for, the prosecution. It has, things in there about Doug Clark, about denying him motions, about denying things, and making comments in there about how he was just kind of annoying, So I'll scan that and put that on the Facebook page too. So I mean, this is also stuff that kind of is reflected in paperwork.
Yeah, and in Doug's own words, his defense budget was a roll of dimes to make phone calls. That was it.
Now, is he speaking to anybody? How did you guys stumble? Before you started talking to him, was he talking to anybody else that was out there trying to help him?
No, I think the people that try to help him, and I'm not putting anybody down if they're listening or things, I think the people that try to help him are the ones that want him to be the serial killer because they can sell their, whatever Doug sends, his letters or his shirts or whatever he sends them, they can sell it online and make a profit. I don't think innocent Doug Clark is profitable to anybody, the vultures that are out there. I think those are the people that the majority of all these years he's been in are the people he's talked to. It's not profitable for him not to be the Sunset Strip Slayer. Yeah, and his lawyer really, he's not doing much at all. I mean, he's getting a huge salary from the state of California, housing his files, but not doing anything. And we've talked to his lawyer. We've introduced ourselves. We went in person and met him. He basically said, yeah, he wanted to work with us. He was into it. He wanted whatever we can do to help. So we started asking for specific things out of the case file, and then he just clammed up on us and basically said, no, I'm not going to work with you. Sorry, I don't care what Doug says. I'm not giving you any information. But this new place, I don't want to call it place, this new organization we're working with, I don't want to mention any names.
Right.
They can subpoena the records without damaging Doug's relationship with his attorney. So we're going to go that route. This organization is going to subpoena the records for us.
And that's something that's really important. I mean, this is as interesting as this is, as passionate as Dave is, and I am. We're talking about a human being, Doug, the victims' families. So, the last thing we want to do is, move too quickly with certain things and potentially mess up an opportunity.
Yeah. Also, Ed, really quick, as far as the organization I was telling you about, this organization is also going to get us a grant to have DNA tested, because through all these years, there hasn't been not one stitch of DNA examined, not one. Now, and there's so much DNA, like, for instance, in Jack Murray's van, and I don't want to get all over the place here, but this kind of goes back to the DNA. In Jack Murray's van, and we have the photo of this, Ed, they found a piece of human scalp with blonde hair on it. Huge piece of scalp. There's no way that came from a live body. I mean, this was someone missing that much scalp would bleed to death. It's really horrible. But they have it in the evidence, and there's never been, and it was in Jack Murray's van. It's never been tested. Nothing has been done to it at all.
Okay,
Carol
just to clarify for the audience, what they're saying is that Jack Murray, who was killed in his own van, that there's evidence of another human body being killed in that van. That could possibly be one of these victims that Mr. Clark is being charged with. Now, go ahead, Dawn. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's when Dave first told me about that, and I hadn't seen the picture or looked at the piece of evidence, I was like, well, maybe it was a fight, maybe there was a struggle. But then when you look at it, it's far too big. And Carol talks about her kill bag, and in her kill bag was a bone saw that she used to cut off Jack Murray's head. Her kill bag was just kept in Jack Murray's van. So, and she paid for Jack Murray's van out of the money that she got from a former husband. So it's just a lot of things like that they don't talk about. Like, Doug didn't have a kill bag. Carol had a kill bag that was in Jack's van. It's like, what? And then there's human scalp there. It's just, those are the things that create such doubt.
Yeah, and you can't, we're firm believers. You can't put a serial killer on death row with this much doubt. You just can't. Now, if this DNA was to come back and it's Doug all over it, hey, have a nice life, Doug. You're at where you belong. But we truly feel, after all this time talking to Doug and the documents, that he is not the Sunset Strip slayer.
What other DNA material is available to be tested?
So they found a lot of blood, obviously, and it was all type A. So, and there's, so they've got that. There was, I guess, some human fluids in one of the heads, the victim's head. There was obviously some blood in different places. In Doug's garage, there was also, he had a garage where he kept a lot of things because, like Dave said, he was kind of transient, kind of a vagabond. He just wanted to party and work. But so there are things. Hopefully, they still have that evidence.
Well, they actually do have the evidence, and just as a little side note, in 1992-93, they took Doug's DNA because they were doing everyone on death row, taking all their DNA, and nothing has ever come back to Doug Clark with his DNA. Nothing.
No other cases, right? Now, this other DNA material, it's all from the van? Because, what about these victims? If they were sexually assaulted, then there would be traces of DNA on these victims.
Well, they did blood types, and this is another thing that's pretty fascinating. They did blood types, and they found that the killer had type A blood. Well, Doug is type O. So that is something right there that's like, well, what is going on with that? So they have the heads, semen. They were taking DNA, of course. At that time, there was no DNA test, but they were taking DNA of everyone. At that time, of every piece of evidence, they were collecting DNA and saving it. So there is DNA out there. The police have even verified that.
But they just typed it for blood. But there was semen in Exie Wilson's on the body there. There was some semen on the bodies of a couple of other victims. Yeah. So they do have that. They do.
With this organization who's testing this material, have you signed anything with them? Has Clark signed anything with them? Are they officially retained?
No, they literally called me last night, and we talked. Yeah, and we talked for about over an hour. We talked, and this woman is just on fire about this. She's like, I'm working on a death penalty case out of Texas right now. I want to work on this Doug Clark stuff. Can I get the ball rolling as far as subpoenaing the records? And I said, let me talk to Doug. Let me get Doug's okay. I talked to Doug this morning, and he said whatever she wants, she can get. So we haven't done anything as far as signing anything. Right. This is all just her saying, look, I've looked into this case. I've known this case for years. I didn't know this other evidence. I didn't know about these other things. I want to try and get actually, her words were, I guarantee you I can get a DNA done. We can get a grant for DNA to be tested.
Oh, yeah, because the settlements in these things are huge.
Yeah, and the power of community. I mean, David has a friend who knows this person, and this, so it's just, that's another thing that we really appreciate about your work, just the connection with people in the community so that information is shared and it's not suppressed anymore. So it's just really phenomenal when people come together, what can happen.
Now real quick, too, how did they hear about you guys working on this? From this, it can't be from this Spreaker podcast.
No, it just started. We just started this. I mean, right. Literally, we had an episode up, but we didn't promote it, nothing at all. So we've just barely started promoting this in the past, few weeks.
Then how did they hear about you?
So I have a friend who has a YouTube channel who does goes after prosperity.
Prosperity preachers.
Yeah, prosperity preachers. Okay. And there's a particular church that he's going hard on, and he's finding all kinds of evidence, just all kinds of dirty stuff. I mean, he's in touch with the IRS, the feds, everyone. I mean, he has a Fed agent that he talks to all the time. So by the woman from this organization follows his YouTube page because she's all into this stuff. She's like, yeah, wherever there's an injustice, she's at. So this person my friend who runs this channel, was talking to her about Douglas Clark. She said she was interested, and he gave her my number, and that's the rest is where we're at now.
Okay, we only have a couple of minutes left. We've got about 4 minutes left. Now, Douglas Clark, you're in contact with him. Now, I guess through JPay now, you're communicating with him through JPay?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, Global Telling.
Right. So how much have you invested into all this?
Not much. Okay. I mean, we send Doug stamps. I really can't think of anything. Doug, because he's on death row, we can't send him anything. Like Christmas, we wanted to send it. Yeah, we bought him some eye patches through the hospital at San Quentin because one of his eyes can't have direct sunlight in it. So we bought him an eye patch, but he really can't do anything. He really can't get anything brought in, I should say.
And $40 a month for phone calls.
Yeah, and maybe $40 a month in phone calls and maybe, $20, $30 a month in stamps. And that's it. But, Ed, we're not doing this for any kind of kind of pay or anything. This is out of pure these are human beings we're talking about. And Don is very into social justice. So this is right up her alley.
Yeah.
And now, Doug, again, it's Doug, what's his last name? Clark, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, who else is he communicating with? You just said he was communicating with some people that were selling his T-shirts and items like that on eBay. But who else is he communicating with?
That's it. He has a friend in Australia he talks to a lot that's been following the case for many, many years. He talks to him. I know there's a female he talks to in the Midwest, and that's just the friendship. So he's really not talking to anybody about what we're talking about today. We're the only ones working with him on that. And I'm sure this new girl we're talking to from this organization, I'm sure he's going to be in contact with her pretty regularly.
Yeah. Okay, so we got about 2 minutes left. What do you want to leave us with?
Ed, I just want to share with you something really important. It's a book it's called Critical Visions by David Slater, and it's got tremendous information in it about this case.
Okay.
So I just want to give credit to them for sure.
Yeah. It is really it really breaks down the truth of the case without any bias or anything like that. Also if you listen to our podcast, I just uploaded Carol in her own words being interviewed by Mark McNamara from Vanity Fair magazine. He was doing an article on the case, and he interviewed Carol Bundy, and you can hear her in her own chilling words. You can hear what a psychopath she is. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, she's quoted as telling the cops, you have no idea how much fun it is to shoot somebody.
To kill people. And cut their heads off.
Now,
and we really invite people to ask us questions, even if they're like, "You guys are crazy." That's okay, because whatever rock we can turn over, we're open to it. So please, people, give us questions.
Yeah, you're gonna regret that one. And the true crime audience, the true crime audience is a very passionate audience that will not give up an inch. Critical Visions. Now, is the author of Critical Visions, is he still alive and available for interviews?
I'm not sure. He's in England, right? He's in England. So David Slater is in England, I believe.
Okay, we'll take a look at that. So we've been talking to Dave and Dawn Coop, and they want to be contacted by you, not me. Now they want to hear from you. Ed Opperman, unless there's any confusion, Ed Opperman doesn't want to hear from you. Dave and Dawn Coop does. Dead Man Talking is on Spreaker. Dead Man Talking, it's the Douglas Clark story. Douglas Clark on YouTube and on Facebook. Again, Douglas Clark and Dave and Dawn Coop. Do you want to give out an email address if someone wants to get a hold of you? Or?
They can get us on we'll post it on our information on YouTube.
There you go.
Because it's a really long email.
And we're on Spotify too.
Yeah.
Spotify as well. So and if someone wants to leave them a comment on Spreaker or Spotify, they'll see that.
Yeah.
And you can reach out to them that way. Guys, thank you so much. Very interesting story. Keep me posted.
Definitely. Thank you.
Bye, Ed.
Good night. Good night, Don. Bye.
Bye.